Arthur Morgan and John Marston understandably attract a lot of attention for being the protagonists of the Red Dead Redemption games thus far, but also for their depth of personality and their journeys throughout their games. While the shadow they cast is undeniably large, it would be a mistake to ignore Dutch van der Linde, leader of the van der Linde gang. It is, after all, the van der Linde gang to which the protagonists belong. As such, the gang is significantly informed by Dutch's ideals. We'll be exploring more about Dutch as a character by offering an evaluation on just what type of person he is. But before we begin, a quick word of caution. There will be spoilers going forward. The primary purpose of Dutch is to embody a romanticized ideal of what being an outlaw means. This ultimately can take many forms, but for Dutch in particular, we should be making inferences through his personality. Dutch is highly charismatic, and it is because of this that people tend to follow him, regardless of whatever they may actually think about his actions. Dutch sees himself as pursuing a sense of liberation that exists away from the corruption of American law. For people who generally live abnormal lives outside of the boundaries of society or are simply barely surviving economically, being an outlaw and specifically being a part of the van der Linde gang gives them a sense of belonging. The importance of having an anchor and a sense of identity in a trying time cannot be overstated. It doesn't hurt that being an outlaw would seem to suggest a sense of being outside of the reach of law enforcement, which can add to a sense of empowerment and freedom. But the benefit of the van der Linde gang's existence was not just psychological. Of course, it offered a means of survival for those who were a part of it, even if illegally, and even at the cost of significant danger. Danger, whether it be at the hands of whomever the gang may cross, the heist conducted as part of being in the gang, or in the eyes of the law as they pursue all outlaws to institute a new meaning of civilization. An important aspect of Dutch's character is the sense of vagueness that surrounds him. It's left to the interpretation of the player whether or not he sincerely believes in pursuing a life of freedom outside of the bounds of society, or is expressing some sort of antipathy against society itself, or is expressing some sort of unsolved vengeful impulses or trauma from the past. In his better moments, Dutch speaks in highly charged generalities, powerful and moving words of poetry, while his actions often suggest that he doesn't hold human lives in high regard. His words, spoken at a psychological distance, are often meant to be familiar and bring people close to him, making someone feel like they belong when someone is called his brother. But he is actually non-committal to people and to crafting a real identity for himself. Dutch also seems to have a reoccurring problem with authority. It should be noted that while Dutch displays tyrannical tendencies himself, it absolutely doesn't disqualify him from having authority issues. Dutch frequently only wants to listen to himself and is distrusting of those who disagree with him or are skeptical of him. Dutch manifests his inability to respect any sense of authority by believing that only he should be listened to. He takes money after they complete jobs. He frequently talks about faith as a means of keeping people close to him, and frequently resorts to violence, especially by the time of the first Red Dead Redemption. The pursuit of whatever he wants is absolute, not necessarily the achievement of a goal that suits the general welfare of his allies, and himself, though his impulsivity and tenuous grasp on reality do not allow it. His confrontations with reality are psychologically uncomfortable for him, and this manifests through denial and erratic attempts at controlling people and the environment around him. When he is unsuccessful, he digs his heels in most of the time. In evaluating his relationship with authority, it is also helpful to think that while outlaws by definition see themselves as operating outside of the law, they are subject to a different set of social rules. Outlaws may identify as being outside of the reach of that law enforcement, but this isn't actually true. Instead, their actions are even more likely to attract the attention of the police. As the word normal is defined by what it means to exist harmoniously in a society with police, and wherein the police are meant to be upstanding peacekeepers, outlaws can never live as comfortably as a normal citizen would. Instead, they just operate under a different set of rules. After all, no outlaw seriously considers it worth their time to be in prison, so they must take extra care to avoid the police. What Dutch believed was that the rules that were designed to wipe out the outlaws were corrupting of a fundamental purity of the human condition that was not meant to be altered. It would absolutely be fair to call him the most complex character in the series. Dutch van der Linde is ultimately a man committed to his ideals for his own sake. His belief in the sense of freedom and being in love with the concept of being an outlaw and a libertine philosophy on life are expressions of his seeking release and empowerment in life. His philosophies are rooted in self-interest and are incidentally useful in rallying those who find favor in his outlook on life. Dutch views himself as a victim or a hero, never as someone who can really accept guilt. And when he finds himself unable to cope with his own failures or maintain psychological fortitude by either accepting his flaws or disregarding them altogether, his psychological stability plummets. He is not greatly committed to other people. They are mostly tools for him such that they are convenient in his life. Dutch could have been far more successful than he was but for his major personality flaws, including a delusional narcissism and his impulsivity. As a result, Dutch barely had the ability to be effective in pursuing his own goals. But it is due to all of these dimensions that he is such an effective character. Imagine a world wherein Dutch was much more competent and stood as an effective obstacle to the police. He would be far more menacing to the protagonists, even though he is ostensibly their ally and leader. His enemies and the citizens he encounters would be little more than playthings that he could easily manipulate by talking circles around them, or through using threats and fear. Dutch would not be nearly as sympathetic as people often find him to be, whether they are the people who he associates with or really the audience of people who are actually playing the game. And that's it for our video on Deciphering Dutch. Be sure to tell us what your thoughts are on Dutch in the comment section below. Do you think that he is a great villain? Do you even think that he's a villain at all? Do you think that he was a would-be hero whose path in life was misdirected? Nonetheless, Dutch is a fascinating deconstruction on the tension between idealism and having a grasp on one's reality. And thank you very much for watching. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.